Welcome back to The Takeout. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. According to federal data, Americans own $1.2 trillion in credit card debt. That as of the third quarter of last year. Might be higher by now. LendingTree tells us that that amount has risen by 60% in 4 years. Earlier this month, President Trump on social media ordered banks to lower credit card interest rates to 10%. Nothing has happened. Why? Well, because legislation is required to do that, and that is where my next guest may well come in. Florida Republican Congresswoman Paulina Luna joins us now from Capitol Hill. She has legislation with Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, an interesting partner, that would require a 10% limit. Congresswoman, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. How would your legislation work, and how long would that 10% limit apply?
Well, we're looking to do permanent caps at 10%, and it would be effective immediately upon passing in the Senate. What's been interesting is we're trying to basically, and this has been our argument the whole time, if some of these banks, the biggest banks in the country, are going to receive bailouts or have received bailouts from taxpayers in the past or in the future, ultimately, we then should tell them you cannot literally have indentured servants that are sometimes maybe paying as high as 25, 30% on some of these credit card interests. What's been interesting is we actually introduced this last year together, and immediately upon introducing, I started getting bank lobbyists trying to come into my office. I started having groups that were paying influencers to try to attack me, saying that if I was going to push this legislation, that all of a sudden I was somehow a communist and was going to be responsible for people losing their credit cards. And I would argue the exact opposite. A lot of the reason why some of these people are in debt is because here in Washington, D.C., people were not able to get their act together. The previous administration, I don't think, had great policies, and it resulted in inflation. And a lot of people were going paycheck to paycheck because of how expensive everything was getting. So I think that this is a healthy piece of bipartisan legislation. I think normal people are impacted this. It doesn't matter your party affiliation. And I think the fact that the president is championing this is going to make it very difficult for some of my Republican colleagues to try to block it. They're already trying to say what we're doing right now is somehow not a conservative thing to do. But I would say that bailing out corporate banks and working on behalf of some of these corporate institutions is not a conservative thing to do.
Congresswoman, I don't know if you saw it, but yesterday on CNBC, the president reiterated what he's called for is a one-year 10% cap, and then it could go back up after that. Are you satisfied with that?
Well, I think that he knows how to thread the needle, and I think that he's putting a pressure campaign, which I agree with, on the House of Representatives, whether it's here in the House or the Senate. But I would also, too, just reiterate the fact that I think if some of these banks have received big bailouts in the past, that they should have a permanent cap, because they're making a lot of money. And when you're working your entire life, sometimes maybe you might not have a leg up in life, right? You're trying to pay back that debt, but how are you actually going to pay back so much of that debt? And this also, too, I think gets into the student loan interest argument, which there's going to be something on that here pretty soon, too. But the point is that I think that this is a very healthy conversation to have. And I think that if you're receiving taxpayer dollars anyways, then we should have a say on how much you're charging on interest.
When you find yourself working with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and President Trump had a conversation with Elizabeth Warren, Democratic Senator of Massachusetts, about this issue, is that a populist fusion of parties from your perspective?
It could be populist fusion, but we also like the art of the deal, and so we're willing to broker those deals. I've learned a lot, especially being on Capitol Hill, from the president, but yes, I think populism, this is where it's fusing on both sides, and I think that you're seeing support for it. And I think there's support among the American people. It's really the people up in Washington that are controlled by special interests that have an issue with it.
You alluded to this, but what the banking industry says is these rates allow it to provide for applicants credit that they would otherwise not be able to provide. Either that is to say these higher rates finance their ability to spread credit in more directions. How do you respond to that?
I think that they're going to lend it anyways, because if they don't, they're going to lose money. And ultimately, banks are driven by whether or not they can make a profit. I also think, too, that argument goes out the window when some of these banks have had to receive federal taxpayer dollars in bailouts. And so that's been my argument the whole time. And again, I had people trying to pay influencers, not scholars, not legal theorists, literally influencers, to try to attack me over it. So I think if I'm taking on the influencer world because I'm trying to do the right thing and help advocate for the small guy, the little guy, and the American people, I think I'm on the right side of history on this one.
Before I let you go, Congresswoman, before this can get to the Senate, it has to get through the House. Do you have a commitment from leadership to have a floor vote?
Oh, I don't think leadership necessarily likes this, but I think that it helps having President Trump. We have literally the 800-pound gorilla in the White House that's drumming this all the way through. So I think I'll win that one.
Congresswoman Paulina Luna, I appreciate the time. Thanks much.
Thanks.